Welcome to PixelTunes Radio,
a podcast where we have fun
talking about video games
and video game music.
I'm Mike.
And I'm the Master Ed.
Ooh.
And I'm the guest Todd.
And you are listening to episode 92. We are diving into a little company named Quintet. So we are covering pretty much every game that Quintet has done.
Just about.
Part.
We'll touch on mostly all of them. So this idea was brought upon by Todd. I actually just asked him point blank. I was like, it's been a while since you've been on the show. Mm-hmm. Do you want to come on? Of course he said yes, because we're awesome. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, if we're going to do a show, we pretty much brought him on for shows that we wanted to do that we knew he knew a lot about.
Right.
So what would a topic of your choice be? And he immediately said Quintet. So, Todd, why is Quintet, so big for you?
I'm just a big fan of mostly their SNES stuff. Actually, in preparing for this episode, I looked into some of their later games, which might ultimately have been the reason for their demise. Because I never knew about their PlayStation and Sega Saturn games.
Yeah.
There's only a couple, and that was right at the end of the company's existence. But I was a big fan of ActRaiser, big fan of the Soul Blazer series. The Soul Blazer trilogy, which we'll get into later. Very much enjoy their games.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really cool music in their games as well, and a lot of composers that kind of keep popping up over and over and over again, so we'll kind of learn their histories as we go through the show. Mike, outside of ActRaiser, do you really have any sort of experience with the company at all?
A little bit. I mean, ActRaiser 1 and 2 definitely, mostly 1. I loved that game growing up as a kid, and then I played Soul Blazer briefly, really briefly. And Grand Stream Saga I own, but I haven't started it yet. So, this episode's going to be great for you RPG freaks who are super into RPGs and action RPGs and those types of games, because most of the games that we're talking about are of that variety. And also for you classical music fans and orchestral music fans, you're really going to appreciate this episode because we've got a lot of really good classical tunes for you.
It's a pretty mellow playlist with some kind of outliers there. There's some strange stuff, some mellow stuff, and then some rockin' stuff too. So before we talk any more about Quintet, we have a couple segments to get through at the top of the show. One is Clarification Corner. So Mike, you have one clarification to make?
I have a little baby clarification corner to make. In the previous episode 91, I mentioned that I forget what we were talking about. I think it was
it was a PixelChat question.
It was a PixelChat question, and I said El Viento had a CD, like a Sega CD or a Mega CD version, and that's actually incorrect. What I meant to say is Ernest Evans. It's of the same developer and of the same trilogy, because it's a trilogy of games. But yeah, I accidentally said El Viento when I met Ernest Evans, so sorry.
Easy mistake to make.
Yeah.
Easy mistake. So my clarification is that you were actually correct. We were playing a track from a game named Choro Q.
Right.
And so I pronounced it Koro Q. That's the way I've always pronounced it. It is actually with a soft CH. It's ch. Right. And I was wondering why I always, because the Final Fantasy, the Chocobos, I always said Cocobos. Just for some reason, that CHO always was a hard CH for me.
I always called them Chocobos.
And I think it's because, that PlayStation era, I had been taking a lot of Italian in high school. And CH is always hard C in Italian. So I'm looking at these words and saying, it's got to be, I was just using my Italian to pronounce Japanese words. So I'm sure that's probably how it came to be.
Hey, you got to ride the Kokobo.
It's a Kokobo. So, that's my clarification corner. It's more like Choro, according to Brian.
Right.
It's a little bit of a
Latin vibe in a way.
Choro Q.
Choro Q.
Faxanadu.
I'm good at Choro Q.
Faxanadu, yes. Todd and I are Faxanadu brethren.
That's right.
You guys got to stop right now.
Our first question comes to us from Todd. He says, "Hey guys, long time, first time, love the show, etc., etc. Who is your favorite guest host to have on the show? Signed, Todd."
Scott.
Guest host.
Well, this is awkward.
Anyone but Todd, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
I find that Todd can be really banal.
Right. He's really quiet.
Picks horrible music.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every time.
Walked into this one, my friend.
Yeah.
I'll leave.
No, I don't think that I will say that having Matt Furness on the show was great.
Yeah.
Just because it was awesome to actually talk to a composer. Instead of when we interviewed Ika Mizutani, it was very difficult because he spoke Japanese and we did not, so we had to get a translator.
Right.
And, that was difficult. I would have loved to chat with him, but then again, like, I wouldn't know what he's saying because we would need a translator anyways.
You would have needed an intermediary. So.
Exactly. So I think it's always really cool when we can get somebody from the industry in some capacity to chat with us, just because, we can see that side from their perspective,
right,
which is really cool. So not taking away from our non-composer guests, I really liked having Avalanche Jared on. He was very well spoken.
Yeah, I think every guest we've had has been able to bring their own brand of expertise and fun to the show.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where Jared brought a lot of the really like ambient tracks that I normally wouldn't have picked for Silent Hill, and a ton of knowledge of behind the scenes on that game. And then we had your friend Brian, when we did the point and click adventure, and you guys have been friends forever, so it was like having two mics on the show almost. Yeah. It was overwhelming at times.
And who else? All the other podcasters that we've had on, like Rhythm and Pixels and Pixelated Audio, right?
VGM Jukebox,
right. It's been great to have them on, and
I can't pick a favorite.
Yeah,
anyone but Todd.
Yeah, anyone but Todd, definitely.
Todd, who's your favorite guest host who has been on the show?
Me.
I figured he was going for that. So,
well, I think one of the reasons why Todd's been on so much is because we enjoy having him on so much.
Exactly, so, it's a testament to how we feel about him.
Yes.
Either that, or we just need somebody to fill some airtime. All right.
Boy.
Let's move on to our next question, Mike.
Yes.
What is it?
So we have a question from KeyGlyph, a.k.a. Emily, from VGM Jukebox. And she asked, have you ever injured yourself with a game or system, or have a game or system ever been injured by you? Why don't you go first?
Oh, I have a bad one, actually.
I have a bad one, too. Well, define bad.
Bad? How about nerve damage?
Oh, okay.
I was playing, I forget whether it was, I think it was the original Half-Life.
Mine's emotional damage.
Well, mine's physical damage.
Okay.
I was playing the original Half-Life on my old PC. The game was brand new at the time. I for some reason came up with this really terrible control scheme where I would use like the first mouse button to move forward.
Okay.
I would use the A and Z buttons to look up and down.
What?
And then like the directional keys to look like it was just not a good control. It was before like the whole WASD plus mouse first person shooter control scheme came into play. So I would spend hours playing the game, and my fingers would be going back and forth between the A and the Z keys to look up and down. And so I started to notice after a period of time that like my pinky and my ring finger, I would start to lose feeling in them.
Oh.
But I was an idiot. I was like, I don't know, early 20s back then, and didn't care, so I just kept playing and playing and playing, and pretty soon I literally, my two fingers went numb for like a good 3 weeks straight.
Oh my god.
And I was working at Starbucks at the time. And I was...
Cafe latte?
Well, yeah, I was really scared because I couldn't feel heat in these fingers.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So I would be steaming with these metal pots, and I'd have to make sure that I kept my fingers away from the metal pot, because if it got too hot, like I wouldn't want to like end up with blisters and not even know why. So then it started getting tingly again. Like I started, stopped playing the game, and eventually the feeling came back. But I was like, I was scared that I had done permanent damage. For a while.
Did you go to the doctor or?
I was an idiot.
No,
I didn't even have health insurance back then. I was working. Well, maybe I did. I don't remember. Anyways, I didn't go.
That's crazy.
If I guess if it had lingered on for a long time, I probably would have gone.
Okay. What about you, Todd?
Well, I did get Nintendo Thumb when I was a kid. Yeah. But I think we all did, right? Playing lots of Tetris and whatnot.
Did you get N64 Palm?
I did not get, because I never played, what was the game that actually...
Mario Party.
Mario Party, yeah. I never played Mario Party until later when I played with you, Ed, and that was on GameCube.
That also reminds me, just one other thing. Golden Tee, the arcade game.
Oh, yeah.
I used to play that at a bar with a lot of friends like Steve and a bunch of our friends. And we used to slam that ball so hard that I used to get bruises on the palms of my hands from those.
Ouch.
But anyways, sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
When I was younger, I stepped on an NES game once. Like, you ever step on Legos?
Right.
Same basic thing. Sharp edges,
hard
you step
plastic.
on it, hard plastic. That sucked, but any lasting damage or nerve damage or anything like that, I can't say that I have. And I was never the type to break controllers or throw them against the wall or anything like that. When I got frustrated, I would just rage quit or just calmly put the controller down and walk away and tear my hair out or something. But so no game systems were ever damaged under my doing.
I've only thrown one controller and broken it. It was totally by accident, and that was I had a really awesome PS2 wireless controller that worked flawlessly. I mean, back then you would have controllers that kind of had like lag in them sometimes, and this was one of the best wireless controllers. And it's actually a Green Bay Packers controller, which is unbelievable that it would be that solid, but it really was one of the best PS2 controllers I've ever held, and I've been trying to look for one. I found it on clearance at one point and bought it because I was a Packers fan, and started playing it mostly when I was actually reviewing Haunting Ground, and that was primarily the controller that I played with. I was getting very frustrated because I had an extreme deadline with that review. It had to be done by Halloween, and so I was having a lot of frustrating times with the game. I threw the controller while recording, not the game itself while playing the game, but I threw the controller during the skit when I'm like passing the controller.
Oh, yeah.
And I threw it and it busted the door that opens that you can put the batteries into in the back. And so I wasn't able to put the batteries into the back anymore because it wouldn't stay. So I had to duct tape it just to finish the skit. But at that point, I basically had to toss the controller out, unfortunately. The real emotional damage story that I have, which I can't believe I'm going to talk about this, is incredibly embarrassing. One time I was playing something for N64. It might have been Zelda, I don't remember.
And he pooped all over himself.
Pooped all over myself, yes. I was getting immensely frustrated with the game, whatever game it was that I was playing. And I remember I threw the controller down, but it didn't break. I still have the controller, actually, but
there's still poop on it, too.
There's still poop on it, yeah. I remember getting up, and I had to take a shower. So I took all my clothes off. This is a completely true story, by the way. Completely 100% true. Okay. I'm not making it up. So I take all my clothes off. I'm about to get in the shower, and I tripped over the cord for the controller, and I fell somehow so that I landed on the analog stick.
How?
On, like, in my ass. Like, not all the way in or anything, but, like, definitely, like, I felt the tip of the analog stick press up against my butt.
That's amazing.
Analog stick.
An analog stick.
Yes. So, I, of course...
It's N64 play.
Yeah, there you go. Heyo. So, I, of course, was extremely embarrassed, even though there was nobody in the room. I was living with my dad at the time, like, nobody was home. So, I quickly cleaned the controller with, like, alcohol, like, definitely was like,
Vodka.
Just, I started drinking the vodka, I smoked a cigarette, I was like, was it good for you? I was nuzzling the controller. So, yeah, that's my extremely embarrassing story that I've actually never told anybody, so...
I'll take almost permanent nerve damage over that any day.
Have we ever played N64 over Mike's place? I don't think so. I'm trying to think if I should go and like wash my hands.
Yeah, I don't know.
I cleaned the controller.
Yeah, but
I cleaned it good.
So there was poop on it. I was right all along.
You're right.
Amazing. It's like I'm psychic.
Oh boy. All right. Who's next?
Spending way too long on these questions. All right, so next one is from Ben Ishman of The Dyad Presents, a video game music podcast. He asks, which video game power-up score or points token would you like to eat? For example, the Castlevania Tasty Meat, Ninja Turtles Pizza, the petals and stalk of a delicious fire flower, Pac-Man cherries, or whatever. Tasty power-ups.
I'm going to go with Pac-Man cherries because everything else has been on the floor or has been sitting there for a while, and... You know, the cherries just kind of show up and then they disappear immediately, so you better eat them or else they're gone. And, I mean, the Castlevania wall meat, I mean, who knows how long that's been in there.
Horse glue.
Horse glue, yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Todd?
Pretty much anything in River City Ransom.
Okay.
There's some good stuff in there.
Sushi,
sashimi, and
veal wall, and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And it gives you like kick power and jump power and all kinds of
That's
stuff.
That's true.
So I'll take just about anything in that game.
From me, anything from Yume Penguin Monogatari.
Yeah, like watermelons.
Lots
and
of
stuff
treats.
And,
levels made of candy, but then you get those diet shakes, so you could gorge yourself on stuff, get really fat, and then just have a whole bunch of diet shakes and immediately thin down, like right then and there. So
that is true.
Perfect.
Our next question to us comes from Cam Chiles, and he asks, what game is the quote-unquote one that got away for you? maybe a game you owned and lost or sold, or one that you kept meaning to pick up when it still had a reasonable price tag. Chrono Trigger would definitely be mine. That was Cameron Chiles saying Chrono Trigger would be his.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I was actually just talking with Mike about this
before
you showed up. I recently picked up a copy of Earthbound at Retro World Expo, which was a game that I wanted to get a hold of for a long time. I was thinking about purchasing it back when it cost about $55 on the market, and I passed it up saying, $55, come on. There's no way that I'm going to spend that kind of money on it. And now that it's a $180 game, I managed to get a copy at the con for about $130, which is a terrible price when you think I could have picked it up for $55.
Yeah.
It's a great price when it normally goes for $180. So I kind of got hornswoggled on that one.
Hornswoggled.
Gerrymandered. For me, I don't know. I mean, I've seen, I think I was talking about it last episode, where I have been in stores, back when I was a kid, where I saw, Panzer Dragoon Saga and Burning Rangers, on the store shelf for, retail price of $40 or something like that. And I'm not really a collector, so I don't really have any sort of memory, I wish I had that game, because I would just play the ROM. I don't really care. But in terms of games like that where I could, make a chunk of money off it nowadays, those are the kind of games where I would be like, darn it, I wish I had had that. I still have Guardian Heroes, which I got for retail price when it was new, but that game has a lot of sentimental value because I loved it when I was a kid, so, that's one of the games, I have in box that I'm not going to sell off. But
right.
I think if it were a game like Panzer Dragoon Saga, I'm not a big RPG guy, so I would probably get rid of it when it got up to a good price, something like that. So that's kind of the one that got away.
There's a couple games that I saw back in the day, mostly eBay searching, like Metal Storm for the NES. I remember seeing it for $40 and being like, oh, that's way too expensive. I'll wait. And now it's a $120, $130 game. Chippendale's Rescue Rangers 2, that's another one that I saw that I was like, I saw it at a store for $100 loose. And was like, that's way too expensive for that game. I'll never... And this was right before it really jumped in value. And I was like, no, I'll just wait for it to go down in price. It shouldn't be that expensive. And now it's a $300 game. So...
Yep.
I mean, there's so many other games. For the most part, I'm pretty happy with everything that I've been able to get for the prices that I got for them. So, can't really fault it.
When I first started working at GameStop, we were one of the few GameStops in the area that took in old classic games. Most of the other GameStops were all just doing current games at that point.
The PS2 era?
This was PS2 era, yeah.
Yeah.
And, it was PlayStation era.
Okay.
Sorry. And most stores would just trade in PlayStation games, sell PlayStation games. They would take NES games in, but they would ship them to, their warehouse, and then they would send them out to the stores that did carry the retro stuff, which we were. And I remember, we had this huge bin of Nintendo stuff, and it was all, one price. It was, $3 for any game you want. So, Final Fantasy 1 would come in, all these high-value games.
Yeah.
And I got a couple here and there, which I was able to sell off. But then I remember while I was working there, one morning we got our price change report, and all of a sudden all of our Nintendo games were individually priced.
Yeah.
And that's when we knew that we should have probably cleared out all the really expensive ones before that. So,
yeah. We've talked about these sort of situations on the podcast before. I got Shantae for $3 loose. I got Wild Guns when I was working at Game Crazy for $13, which I'm honestly thinking about selling and just buying the reloaded version and using that money elsewhere in my collection, because the reloaded version is the complete full game with so much more, and it's $20, $30.
That's right. At Funcoland, some guy tried to trade in 32X and a whole bunch of games. We didn't take 32X trade-ins.
Yep.
So I gave him personally $60 for the whole lot.
Oh, wow.
In that lot was Spider-Man Web of Fire, in box with manual. I sold that for $150 later on.
Bet you're kicking yourself now for that one.
Is it worth more than that now?
Way more. Yeah, that's the most expensive, I think, game for the 32X.
I needed the money at the time. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a 32X for free at the store I worked at. Cool. Some guy just came in.
Well, I have two 32Xs, so I wonder if you could stack those.
Are we going to build one of those stacks that you see?
Yeah.
I can make a really tall stack with all my Genesis stuff. All right. I think we've gone on long enough with these questions.
Yes.
Thank you guys for sending in your questions. You can always send us more questions at pixeltunesradio@gmail.com, and we will answer them on the show. Without Todd. All right, so without further ado, let's get into the first track, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Quintet and the company itself after that. So, What do we got coming up first, Todd?
First is the first game that Quintet came out with, ActRaiser. Came out in 1990. This is Theme from ActRaiser.
Composed by Yuzo Koshiro.
Welcome back. That was ActRaiser for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, released in 1990. The song, or track, is called Theme from ActRaiser, and it's by Yuzo Koshiro. Great track.
Fantastic track. It's Yuzo Koshiro. I mean,
so,
can't go wrong.
That beginning part, the do-do-do-do, I laugh now because my dryer, when it goes off, it plays a very similar sound. It's like do-do-do, but it's like the way it's like
the cadence is
cadence is like exactly the same almost. So even though it's not the same notes, it always reminds me of ActRaiser every time it goes off.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Act dryer.
I always thought that this was a great introduction for a video game. Like, you know, sometimes you turn your video game system on, like you're getting ready to play games, and like you turn it on and like go and get a glass of water or something, and like the game boots up and it starts playing the opening music. And if that ever happened to you with this game, like you just had this really awesome sort of dramatic song that builds and then sort of hits an apex and sort of holds that excitement for a few minutes. It's really a great song.
Yeah, you really didn't get music this cinematic at all at this point. You know, and the Super Nintendo finally had that capability to do so. Especially with those people who kind of stayed with Nintendo and didn't get a Genesis. Like, this music was just phenomenal because they probably hadn't even heard Yuzo Koshiro's work, Streets of Rage or anything like that at this point either. Not that this sounds anything like Streets of Rage, but
this was probably the first Yuzo Koshiro soundtrack that I ever heard. It's interesting. I didn't play this one until I was in high school, and I had a good friend of mine, my buddy Joe, and I went over his house, and he had a Super Nintendo just sitting on his living room floor or whatever. And
did you slip on it?
No, I didn't slip on it. I didn't trip over any wires. No, he had a couple of good different games. He had Mario World, he had Prince of Persia, and he had ActRaiser. And so I would sit down and play ActRaiser at his house, and that was the first time I ever played ActRaiser. And I really fell in love with it. I thought it was a fantastic game. It's also a very unique game because I always thought that it was only an action game, and that you would play as this character called the Master, and essentially you're going through this game as this literal god, taking form to this avatar, and you know, this big muscle-bound, almost like Valkyrie type of male hero, and you're going through with this giant sword, and it's a very kind of stiff game, like moving around and jumping, attacking, and whatnot. Very Castlevania-ish in a lot of ways. But after you beat a level, you can then move this, I don't know, giant base, I guess you could call it.
Yeah,
it's like alien spaceship.
Cloud house. Cloud temple.
Yeah, Cloud Temple. And you move it all over this map that's, it's like a top-down map, and you can go to different areas. And so you have to first beat the boss, and then once you beat the boss in the action-based level, you then can go to this, like, you enter into this other kind of sub area, which is basically the actual map, this world. And it's like, green grasses and green fields and everything. And
blue skies.
Blue skies, exactly. And you're working with this little helper angel character, and they like shoot arrows to gain like SP like points, and then you use those points to like make certain elements happen, like heat up the wetlands to make them get
it's
dry.
Very basic city building,
right?
Slight puzzle elements.
It's super basic Sim City, which is perfect for me, a guy who's not really into like building and all that stuff.
Yeah,
because there was an obtainable goal that you had to do, so it felt more arcade-ish in that aspect.
Exactly, and it was good because it kind of introduced me to that whole aspect of gameplay as well, and then you got rewarded with the action sequences that we were so familiar with afterwards.
Exactly.
So, Todd, what was your kind of opinion on the game when you first played it? Did you play it when it was new, or did you play it later on?
I played it later on. I definitely did not have this when it was new. I can't remember when I played it for the first time, but what always amazed me about this game is it was, as you were just describing, like 2 games in one, basically.
Yeah.
It's a side-scrolling action, sort of action RPG kind of game, and a world builder as well. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can actually build the world in such a way where you fail. Like, I don't think that there was a fail.
You just gain power to basically get to where you need to go.
You just keep going until you achieve whatever goal it is that they want you to achieve. I always thought this was a great game.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, since I started playing it.
Yeah, it's one of the best Super Nintendo games out there, I would say.
And for being so early on in the Super Nintendo's library, it's one of the good ones.
Yeah. And as far as the soundtrack goes, I mean, before its release in Europe in 1993, EGM actually gave it the best music of that year for the soundtrack of any system. So that's really cool. I mean, and like I said, I think we've already played Fillmore, which is probably the most famous piece of music from this game. We played that back in our Yuzo Koshiro episode ages and ages ago.
Episode like 16 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So head back and listen to that episode if you want our thoughts on that one.
Yes.
I actually selected that track for this
That's
episode.
right, you did.
Ed's like, you can't play that.
Yeah.
But the theme song is great because it's so dynamic.
Yes.
It goes in so many different places. I love that little like flute trill part at the end, and then that really huge like dun 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 dun, like that build up towards the end is really, really cool.
I was a big fan of the string melodies that kind of permeate it, where it's like da na na na, and it's got that like soaring feel to it, but also the driver that he's using, it reminds me, it gives me flashbacks to Chrono Trigger. It's very similar to the
instruments?
that Yasunori Matsuda
and we'll
used.
actually hear more music using that same instrument set as we go on too, which is cool. Just use it a very different way.
Yeah, and I would say that regarding the soundtrack, it's one of the few soundtracks that has actually been played later on by like an actual like concert like orchestra.
Oh yeah, there's a symphonic retail release CD too.
In 2004, they arranged the music to be played by in the second annual Symphonic Game Music Concert in Leipzig, Germany.
Right. I think I remember saying that in our Yuzo Koshiro episode.
I remember when I went to MagFest and Yuzo Koshiro and Chris Holzbeck were both there, and they were talking about it. And if I recall, they were saying something about how Chris Holzbeck was there or something like that, and he like...
I think he did some of the arrangements or something.
Yeah, I think he did some of the arrangements, so...
Did Koshiro and Holzbeck like bump fists and turn into this one giant mega composer?
No, they should have though. I mean, you could tell that, like seeing them there, that they both respected each other tremendously.
I'm sure.
And I think that they were both fans of each other, so it was really cool to see them talk to each other about video game music.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall.
Oh, man.
All right, so you want to get into our next track?
Yes.
All right.
What do we got?
The next track is the whole reason that Todd is here. It is Soul Blazer for the Super Nintendo. This came out in 1992 by Quintet. This is Lostside Marshes by Yukihide Takekawa and arranged by Kazuhiko Toyama.
Welcome back. That was Soul Blazer, released in 1992 on the Super Nintendo. The track was Lostside Marshes by Yukihide Takekawa, arranged by Kazuhiko Toyama.
All I gotta say is one word about this one.
Meow. Meow.
We were commenting while we were listening that it sounds like a cat.
Being slapped by the slap bass.
Right.
Love that slappy bass.
Yeah. This soundtrack is really interesting because originally I wasn't that into it, but then I kind of felt like the composers were going for something like, like that British new wave movement where the songs were like really kind of awkward, like 99 Red Balloons, Rock Me Amadeus, Der Kommissar, like that kind of style of music where it's very kind of geeky sounding.
Right, like very like geek with bass heavy tones.
Yeah, and once I kind of fit this music into that kind of a genre, I think I appreciated it a whole lot more.
I mean, we are all geeks here, right?
That's true.
I try to be. I mean, do you guys agree, or am I just...
No, I'm with you.
I'm with you there, yeah.
Yeah.
Why'd you pick this particular track for the show?
Well, you know that when we were thinking about doing this episode, or when we were talking about it, I did tell you that I would just do an entire episode on this game. I would just say, play the soundtrack from beginning to end. I love this game. I love the entire soundtrack. I've played through this game quite a few times.
Okay.
It is one of my favorite games on the Super Nintendo. Longtime listeners of the show will remember my first appearance, I think was episode 3. I proclaimed my love for this game.
That's right.
Yes.
And it continues. There was a track from this game on there.
I think I liken that song to like one of the newer Nine Inch Nails tracks, and this one has that kind of bass groove at the beginning that sounds a lot like something off of like...
Something out of like a Korn track or something.
That too, yeah.
A lot of bass heavy types of things, yep.
I've only played this once, and I couldn't get into it. I don't know. I've said this time and time again, so I'll touch on it briefly, but like RPGs or action RPGs, I don't know what it is about it, but they really have to grip me quickly, and I have to get interested in them fairly quick, and if I don't, then I just lose all interest. And if an intro is too long or there's way too much dialogue in the beginning, I start to slip pretty quickly. And that's the reason why there's so many great games out there that... What's so funny?
You said you start to slip, and every time I say that, I have a vision.
My butt going into a controller.
Goodness gracious.
Oh my. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but my mind just starts to wander, and I lose
doesn't hold
interest.
your attention, yeah. I mean,
that's
So why did it hold your attention, Todd? Why is this one of your favorite games of all time?
I think this was the first Quintet game that I played. I think I played it before ActRaiser.
Okay.
And so the dungeon crawling while you attack and destroy enemies, and that unlocks a person or a building back in the town, or you start sort of building the town. I mean, building isn't really the right word because you're not placing anything, but you're revealing or releasing, I don't know what it is, but you're sort of putting this town that's been wiped off of the face of the planet back together.
Okay.
And I found that really, you keep in an area of the game, you would have to go into the dungeon and fight, release some people in the town, go back to the town, talk to them, get information or an item or something, and then go back into the dungeon, fight some more. And it was just like a really interesting progression in the game for me. And also the battle mechanic was interesting. If you hold the L or the R button, you'll just sort of hold your sword out and do what's called crab walking. So you just face one direction and you can move around.
Straight.
So if you're fighting an enemy and he's moving around, you can sort of follow him with your sword while you're sort of like poking him. I always thought that was...
It's kind of Link could kind of do that in Link to the Past.
Yeah, if you could hold out your sword and kind of move around. What's interesting is that this game also has a character in it called the Master, and he's the chief, like, kind of god or lord of the Soul Blazer world. So I know that this is part of, like, a trilogy of games, but do you think that this links up with ActRaiser because of that as well, or...?
I don't know if it's considered to be in the same world.
I don't think so.
As ActRaiser.
No.
I know that the Soul Blazer trilogy
Right.
is, but they do hold some similarities in that you are starting with a decimated world and you're bringing it back, you're rebuilding it.
Yeah,
Right.
Your actions.
A lot of the early Quintet games were based around the theme of creation and destruction.
Right.
And obviously these two games really follow that. Good versus evil, building something that was once destroyed, same as we were building the towns in ActRaiser after the world was destroyed by Tanzra. So that really fits together. Speaking of that, why don't we talk a little bit about the creation of Quintet and how it came to be. So originally it was founded in April of 1989 in Tama City, Tokyo. And the founders named the company Quintet after the 5 basic tenets of game design: planning, graphics, sound, programming, and production.
Right. And the founders of Quintet were Tomoyoshi Miyazaki, who was the president. He was the scenario writer and programmer for the first 2 Ys games under the employment of Nihon Falcom. And then Masaya Hashimoto was the co-founder, and he was the lead director, designer, and programmer on those first 2 Ys games as well. Both of these founders left Falcom during the development of Ys 3, Wanderers from Ys.
Basically, they were at a very successful game company.
Yeah.
And I think they had a lot of creative ideas of their own, and they wanted to go out and make those ideas come to life. So that's why they formed Quintet. That also kind of gives us insight as to why Yuzo Koshiro composed their first game, because he was working on the Ys games.
Right, and he was friends with them, most likely.
Right, and I imagine that's why he didn't stay on for Ys 3, because he went to go follow Quintet and worked on ActRaiser instead. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
They were actively developing games until 2002. Then they were doing some uncredited contract work for other developers until 2006. And then sometime between 2006 and 2008, the company closed due to bankruptcy. A lot of the members of Quintet moved over to a company named Shade. And we'll be talking about them a little bit as we go through the show, but they're actually still active nowadays. So a lot of those old Quintet members are still in the game and development industry.
A lot of the games that we're going to be talking about were actually published by Enix. And because of that, the rights of these series are owned by Square Enix.
Right.
When Enix merged with Squaresoft, they pretty much got all the rights to a lot of these games, which is, good, because these games will be held and can be used in virtual capacity, like Virtual Console. In fact, Square Enix holds the rights to ActRaiser, so that's why you're able to play ActRaiser on Virtual Console.
Yeah, and that's why ActRaiser 6 is coming out next week, right?
Yeah, right, totally. Yeah, right. All right, let's move on to our next track of the Soul Blazer series. And this track is called Basement of Dr. Leo, and it's again by Yukihide Takekawa and Kazuhiko Toyama.
And we're back. That was The Basement of Dr. Leo from Soul Blazer, produced by our company of the day, Quintet. Came out in 1992 in the SNES, composed again by Yukihide Takekawa and arranged by Kazuhiko Toyama. And I could just picture the composers going, look at all of these orchestra hits. Use them all at once!
I really like the dun 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 dun, like descending down the stairs into the basement of Dr. Leo.
And
it's really cool.
There's these high little slides, like
yeah.
They're almost identical to the stuff that plays, the background music that plays in the caves in the Mother series. Mother 2 and Mother 3, I think, both have that kind of a thing going on. This further cements my opinion on the whole 80s new wave. Like, it has that very like Rock Me Amadeus feel. Why did you pick this track, Todd?
All right, I know this song's a little silly. I get it. But have you ever watched like Saturday morning cartoons and like they'll show like a scene of industry, like smokestacks,
Yeah.
like pistons pumping and stuff like that? And I always envisioned this sort of being like the soundtrack for that.
Yes.
And I know this is a weird link to make, but fans of the show will know that Ed and I did an industrial episode, and I always sort of felt this song was industrial, but in a different way because it reminds me of industry.
Right. Like a manufacturing song.
Right.
Yeah.
You guys clearly should have done that for when you did the industrial.
I thought about it, but I didn't
episode.
think Ed would accept it.
The production line episode.
Yeah.
It's a good theme to go for sometime.
There you go.
Yeah,
no, I really dig this track, and I don't know, like I'm getting very heavy vibes of if I gave this game a bigger chance, like if I actually had a little bit of patience, I would really be able to enjoy this one, because it is top down. It's a Zelda style game, action RPG type of style, and the music's great. So far, everything that I've heard, I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, and if you do like it, then you've got another couple of games in the series, which we're going to talk about soon, to go ahead and check out as well. So
yes,
let's talk a little bit about the guys that wrote the soundtrack. First up is Yukihide Takekawa. He's actually best known for being the vocalist to the band Go Diego, and I think we made a Dora the Explorer joke last time we talked about that, because it was Go Diego Go. He also had a solo career, and he's an author. He's been releasing albums since 1974, so he was already pretty well known when he made the soundtrack for this game. He also composed the soundtrack to the animated film Galaxy Express 999 and wrote the music for the Shoshinsai Flashman series, which is the 10th Super Sentai series.
Right. And then Kazuhiko Toyama also goes by Kaz Toyama, and he's mainly a film and anime composer. And he has done various different works, including A Wind Named Amnesia, Bikuri Man, Shojin Sentai Jetman, which I am a big fan of, Cyber City 808, Tekken the Motion Picture, and he also composed some music for Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. Again, these are the films and animes that we're talking about, so we're not talking about Crisis Core Final Fantasy, Crisis Core. That's a game.
Yeah.
Right. But Shojin Sentai Jetman, we're not talking about the video game, because that was composed by Hiroyuki Iwatsuki. But the actual music in the Shojin Sentai Jetman series. So all really good stuff.
And these are all very popular series. I mean, these are series that I've heard of in America, so I'm only assuming that they were pretty big in Japan as well. So he's got some major credits to his name. Both of them do. There haven't been many other games that these two have worked on, so it might have just been that Quintet kind of tapped them as like, we're a brand new company, we're looking for guys that are like in the music industry to come compose for us, maybe to give us a little bit of a name for ourselves or something like that. Especially coming from Falcom, because they had such a focus on music, JDK band and all that stuff over there. I'm sure these guys were looking for high-profile people to make their soundtracks for them. So
I think they wanted to continue with music of all different types of styles and variety, but they wanted music to be definitely a focal point for their games, which is great. So I'm on board with that.
Exactly. So Quintet was still riding high at this point.
Agreed. Well, there were only 2 games in though, because their third game was our next title, which is ActRaiser 2, and that came out in 1993 on the Super NES. This track that we're going to be listening to is called Banishing of Tanzra, and it's by, again, Yuzo Koshiro.
Who?
Yuzo Koshiro.
Who?
Yuzo Koshiro!
Oh.
Tweety birds and honeybees. It's time for everyone's favorite reality video game TV show, Dates with Gaming Icons. Tonight we have a guy named Bill who's about to embark on a date with a heavenly body known as the Master, the hero from the classic Quintet developed title, ActRaiser. Let's listen in and see if we can make a miracle love connection, shall we?
So, it's nice to finally meet you. Dinner was really nice, so thank you for paying.
No problem, the Master. By the way, that's really awkward and formal. Is there anything else I can call you that you'd prefer?
That's a good point, Bill. How about, Lord of Everything?
You know, I think I'm gonna pass on the coffee afterwards. I just remembered I left the stove on, and I suppose I shouldn't have left the iron on inside of it while it was plugged in.
Oh, okay, well, rain check then. How about tomorrow evening?
No, sorry, I have to wash my hair.
All day?
Yeah, sorry, this Friar Tuck hairdo isn't gonna do itself.
Well, what about next weekend?
Having a bake sale with, Land O'Lakes Foundation, yeah.
Oh, now you're just pulling names off of things you see on the breadbasket on the table. What's going on? I thought we had a real connection.
Sorry, I just am really turned off by the whole Master Lord thing.
Well, I'm literally God, so it's not like I'm lying.
I'm just really not into guys who are so beefy.
I mean, this body is just an avatar. I can make the sprite smaller, if you want. Maybe you'd like to see me with wings on my back instead?
Nah, I'll pass. It was nice meeting you. My advice to you is if you want to find someone on my level, bring yourself down a few pegs for once. Take care.
But, I'm just being myself. I mean, I'm a literal god. Waitress, gin and tonic, please.
Aw, yeah! Too bad for the Master, right, folks? Looks like he should just stick to defeating the evil Tanzra and check himself before he wrecks himself and Lego that ego, you know what I mean. Tune in next time when Chun-Li gets taken out to a classic Chinese dinner with some guy named Jeff. This is the Love Master signing off for another episode of Dates with Gaming Icons. Yeah!
Welcome back. That was ActRaiser 2, 1993 release on the Super NES. The track was Banishing of Tanzra, and that was by Mr. Yuzo Koshiro.
Oh, that Tanzra, he got banished.
Well, Tanzra's the bad guy in these both ActRaiser games. So with the first ActRaiser, after you beat the game, you defeat Tanzra, but then you start to notice that the townspeople, these people that you kind of cultivated and you know made them worship you by all the offerings and things that you were doing for them.
All that wheat.
Yes, and they were just kind of like slowly but surely losing faith in you. So you kind of like go off in your cloud spaceship and blast off, to never be seen again. And that's kind of how the game ends. So with ActRaiser 2, Tanzra returns, most likely because they really played up the whole like Christian God versus Satan thing.
Yeah, well, that's another good point, is that there was a lot of, I'm going to say censorship, but a lot of alterations made between the Japanese version, Christian and Christianity-based religious overtones in both ActRaiser games. That was changed to, instead of being called God, he was the Master in the US version, and Nintendo was very, very focused on removing any sort of religious connotations. Yeah.
Yep, and Tanzra was Satan.
Yeah,
in Japan, in the Japanese version of ActRaiser, so...
You guys think the Master dates?
Possibly. Yeah.
It's probably tough out there for a god.
Yeah, possibly. But give him a call.
It's tough when you want somebody to worship you all the time.
Yeah.
Relationships don't work like that.
No, definitely not. That's more of a 1950s thing. So I don't know. This game just. Let's talk about the track first. I love the like staccato stabs.
Oh, that's my favorite part.
Dun, dun, it's just so building, and then when it rolls into those timpani drums, those kettle drums, and you hear that like sweeping, like haunting synth, is very Capcom-esque, like Super Ghouls and Ghosts, Breath of Fire, like it just reeks of that.
Yeah, I think this is even more like we were saying before. I think a lot of those games have a little more of a whimsical quality to it. This has a much more of a dramatic, very. I don't know. I pictured like Mickey Mouse with the hat and Fantasia, with the water and the broomsticks. That kind of Night on Bald Mountain kind of feeling.
Yeah.
It strikes me like I still can't believe this is the same dude that wrote the music for Super Adventure Island and Streets of Rage and The Scheme and all these like poppy, amazingly danceable songs. But then he can also whip out big orchestral stuff like this on the Super Nintendo. It's like it just blows my mind.
So I don't know if you know this about Yuzo Koshiro, but he was actually a really big Castlevania fan. He wanted to do the music for a Castlevania game for the longest time, and this was kind of his like way to do those big booming like orchestral types of soundtracks, but also kind of give it that like dancey electronic metal feel to it, and the first ActRaiser has a lot of that.
Yeah.
This game, not as much.
Much more cinematic and orchestral in this game.
Yeah, I know, Todd, you were saying that this one, the soundtrack didn't really grip you as much, or?
No, in fact, I originally picked the version of the introduction song for this game.
Which is the same as the first
Which
game.
is the same, sort of reimagined a little bit, because, I don't know, the rest of it didn't really grab me. And I've actually never played this game. This is sort of the only game in the Super Nintendo Quintet series, at least that I haven't, so I need to get to it.
It's not as good as the first one. If I recall, they removed all of the like world building
straight up
areas.
action game.
It's straight up action, and I think that kind of takes away from it, because the game definitely feels like the nice thing about the very first ActRaiser is that the controls were very stiff, but it was a very playable game. But if I had to play like 10 levels of just that, I would not be as into it as I was. Those breaks in action where you're, just like doing those little like basic sim type stuff.
Yeah.
Really kind of gives the game a different atmosphere than all the other like generic action platformers.
And it kind of made you feel like you earned the right to play those levels.
Right.
Like you worked towards them.
Yes. And in ActRaiser 2, when they took that away, it made it so that I couldn't appreciate the game as much. So I did own this one or buy this one at one point. Actually, funny story, talk about games that, you regret or don't regret or whatever picking up. I sold my copy of ActRaiser 2 to a game store in a mall, and the money that I used from that, as well as like a couple other games that I got, I traded all of that in, not many games, but I ended up getting Power Blade 2 for like $50 back a couple years ago.
Solid investment.
And it was still like a $150 game at that point, and I got it for like $50. So,
cool.
Talk about trading in games and getting, good deals or whatever. Yeah. So I was pretty happy about that. I got rid of a game that I wasn't really that happy with and got a game that I was happy with.
For some reason, I remember I rented this from Blockbuster, one of the local video shops. I must have not have read anything about it in magazines or something, because I remember being very excited to see what they did with the world building aspect.
Yes.
And then coming home and playing it. And while I was impressed with the visuals, and not so much impressed with the music itself, I was very disappointed that there wasn't any world building, because I think that was actually like one of my favorite parts of the first game.
Right.
Just the fact that they kept it simple and but just playing through the action levels, and the master now has wings and he can dive and swoop. And it was very hard to master.
It was definitely difficult.
There's that word again. But,
yeah.
There are
it was hard to master the master.
It's hard to master the master. There are different types of dives, and if you don't hit the action button while you're coming down diagonally, you kind of glide to the ground and then like skid, and your wings flap, and like you're totally vulnerable and you can't attack for that period of time. And you can also like slide right off of platforms. It was just like ice levels. Like the things that pissed me off about ice levels started pissing me off about ActRaiser 2.
Right.
And I kind of didn't put that on my Christmas wish list after I rented it.
I guess you could say that it was difficult to bait with the master. Oh, come on. That was good.
It doesn't even make any sense. I know what you're going for, but good gracious.
Good gravy. All right, well, let's move on to our next game now. This is the second part of the Soul Blazer series. This one's called Illusion of Gaia. This came out in 1994 on the Super NES. The track is Descent into Darkness, and it's by Yasuhiro Kawasaki.
Let's hit it.
That was Descent into Darkness from Illusion of Gaia, released in 1994 on the Super Nintendo. Music, of course, by Yasuhiro Kawasaki.
This one was interesting. I like that theremin sound that's kind of going in the background.
That whistling?
That whistling theremin, yeah.
First time I played the game and I heard this track, I didn't think that it was part of the music. I thought it was like a bird in the envienment or something like that. And I'm like,
okay.
The hell is that? Like, it really seems to be matched up to the music really well. Like, I wonder if that was on purpose. And then I realized it was actually the music. And
it's in a whole different spectrum than the rest of the music, because everything else is very, very low, and this is like way, way up in the sky. So it feels very separated, yet it kind of gives a more intense feel to the whole track as well.
I think it's interesting because I know that you're a big like drum and bass guy, and Ed, and regarding the orchestral music, to me, orchestral music is improved when it has really awesome drums.
Yeah.
Like, not to say that rock music or techno music or whatever isn't, but I think in orchestral music, for me specifically, I need to have like really big booming drums, and I think that they did a great job kind of implementing those awesome kettle drums into this track. The boom, 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 boom.
Yeah,
boom.
I like how they play on every single like violin hit, so it makes every single note feel much more powerful. And it also keeps more or less, with a few exceptions here and there, but it keeps like a standard tempo, which I tend to like a lot more in orchestral music as well. Being like kind of a dance rock fan, I like when I can tap along to something. So this kind of helps that song as well for me.
I think you guys pretty much nailed it on the song. I mean, what else is there really to say? The game itself, however, you guys haven't played it, right?
I played it really, really briefly, and very similar to Soul Blazer. I think I liked Soul Blazer more, but still, it didn't grip me. It was kind of draggy in the beginning, and I just lost interest really quickly. So,
well, this is the second in what's called the Soul Blazer trilogy. Although they're kind of loosely held together, they're sort of in the same world, and there is something of a storyline there, but it's not a direct sequel.
Right.
This is my least favorite of the three Soul Blazer games. I know a lot of people really love it. I thought it was okay. In fact, I only played it recently, so maybe that has something to do with it.
Probably.
But I felt that the text of the story in the game was, I don't know if it was the translation, but it wasn't very descriptive. Like, I didn't really understand what was going on a lot of the time. And the combat is completely different from Soul Blazer. It's a totally different game. It's good.
Kind of reminds me of like The Secret of Mana, Secret of Evermore.
Yeah,
kind of
it's
deal
much
where they
closer to
changed
that.
a lot from the original.
There were a lot of version differences, mainly due to censorship. There was a native tribe that were cannibals, and so they removed that. All the churches and stuff, religious schools in the game were removed.
Removed or changed?
Changed. So instead of it being a Christian church, it was like a school, that sort of thing. So they changed a lot of that. A lot of the enemies, a lot of the various locations were changed, the names, anything that could be considered any sort of a religious identity was changed. One important reason why the game was changed more than Soul Blazer, I would say, is because this game was, at least in the United States, Australia, and Europe, published by Nintendo. Whereas most of the games that came out in the Super NES were published by Enix.
Okay.
So in this one in Japan, it was published by Enix. So they didn't change any of that because there was no restrictions. But in North America, they were a lot stricter with that type of content. I also think that's the reason why this game is so widely praised and so widely known of those 3 Soul Blazer games, because this game sold like triple what Soul Blazer sold. Soul Blazer sold about 295,000 copies, and this game sold like 695 or something like that.
Probably had more of the marketing power of Nintendo behind it too.
Yeah,
to get those copies out.
I remember Nintendo Power, they released a like special bundle where you could buy it and it would come with like a shirt, like one of those like, it was like a one size fits all sort of thing. And I remember seeing that and being like, oh, I want it for the shirt. But like, I knew nothing about the game. I just wanted the shirt.
Nintendo was an expert at that.
They were masters of merchandising. So
they still are, too.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I also get the impression by this point that Quintet was more willing to change their code and change their game to kind of suit the American audience, where a lot of the other Japanese developers were like, no, you're not going to, I'm not going to change this for you. I'm going to do a Japanese only release, keep all the religious stuff in there, or we just don't have the resources to do it, where Quintet was more willing to change a heck of a lot to do that, which helped them out in the American market a lot too.
But you wonder if that messed with the story overall. They kind of tried to bring it back together, but it's different.
But people never knew the internet wasn't around back then, so the Japanese got their game, the Americans and Europeans got their game, and they never really knew the difference. So I suppose nowadays where they do have fan translations, where they've made direct translations of Japanese games, even though it came out in the English-speaking markets. They've done translations where you would get the Japanese game with English translations.
Yeah.
So you would see what the differences were and still be able to understand the whole thing.
Yeah, that's the RPGs in particular get a lot of that nowadays, where the internet will jump on and kind of work on modifying the Japanese release so that you could play it. One such example is Wizardry 5, which they took the Japanese version and translated all the English. Like, they made it so that you can change the dialogue in that game to English, which was an actual option in the Japanese cartridge. But if you didn't know where to go to change the dialogue into English, you would have no idea how to do it. So they kind of modified that, and you could download the ROM and
make it easy to find.
Patch it and make it easier to find.
Cool. All right. Well, we got a little more Illusion of Gaia coming up. It sounded like I said Illusion of Guy. It's the Illusion of Hagar, too.
Yes.
The next track we got is called Golden Road, which plays in the Great Wall area. Let's take a listen.
Welcome back. That was Illusion of Gaia in the 1994 release for the Super NES. The track was Golden Road, and it's by Yasuhiro Kawasaki. This has a super Chinese vibe to it. It has that sound of the Asian flair.
It's funny, I got that too, but I was also reminded a lot of like Red 13's area from Final Fantasy VII Cosmo Canyon. Mm-hmm. I feel like it kind of like skirted the line between like Chinese and like Native American somehow to me. Which is really cool. I mean, I love the Cosmo Canyon theme. It's one of my favorite songs from Final Fantasy VII, so it was really kind of cool that it brought memories of that back for me.
When does this take place in the game?
On the Great Wall.
All right, then. Good to know. Well, then it fits.
I don't remember exactly how far through the game the Great Wall area is. I have played it recently, but recently was a couple of years ago, so my memory of it is somewhat fuzzy.
Well, that's how it goes with RPGs. If you could say, well, I played this recently, and really what you're saying is, I played this within the past 10 years.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
So do different areas in the game have like different kind of cultural aspects to them? Like this would be like a more like Chinese kind of area where you might go to other areas with different cultures?
Yeah, the game is sort of like a fantasy version of Earth. So there's like different regions that you would find on Earth, you would find in the game. So the Great Wall, I believe there's like a desert sort of Egyptian sort of themed area. Each area, of course, is accompanied with theme music that sort of plays along with it.
Oh, that's cool though. I like that. I got to listen to the whole soundtrack again with that kind of in mind to see if I can pick out where different, songs might fit in with their cultural aspects and stuff. But again, lots of these kettle drums that you were talking about last time. I like the way that the kettle drums and the bass line up in this one. It's like ba-dum-bum, like it makes those bass, like it attacks really, really hard, and then you kind of get that little decay on the bass, so it makes that a lot of fun to listen to.
Even the low-end synth sounds very deep. Wah, 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 wah. It's got this like seesaw-y kind of vibe to it, if you will. Yasuhiro Kawasaki is a freelance composer. He worked very closely with Takara, and many of his compositions were released by them. They're like a publishing house.
They did a lot of the like ports from Neo Geo to the Super Nintendo, like the Art of Fighting games
Fatal
and stuff.
Fury, right. So he did Silkworm on the NES, Sim Tower for DOS, or pre-Windows, Super Millionaire game for the Super Famicom, Cooking Mama on the DS, or also known as Cooking Mama, Babysitting Mama on the Wii, and Dokoro on the Vita in 2013, and that was his last game before he poofed into a ninja.
Poof.
And disappeared.
Yeah, and the Cooking Mama series has a lot of really like colorful, vibrant songs. They don't sound much like Illusion of Gaia at all, so he's pretty versatile.
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool.
Very good. Yeah, so that kind of puts that series on pause for a little while. I mean, it was the game that sold the best. It sold 300,000 copies in the US alone, as compared to 295,000 just for Soul Blazer, like worldwide.
Yeah.
So Nintendo really pushed very hard with wanting to get these games out into the open, and I really just think that it wasn't time yet for RPGs. Like Final Fantasy, even like Squaresoft was coming out with Final Fantasy 2 right around that time. Like Final Fantasy 3 I think maybe came out in 94 if I recall,
and
like
the US Final Fantasy
Final Fantasy 3, right. And that was kind of the beginning when people saw like Final Fantasy 2, Final Fantasy 3, which we talked about on the Final Fantasy episode. And I think they were kind of like, it got people's attention because these games were very highly regarded. And I remember reading about this in Nintendo Power and thinking, oh, this looks kind of neat, because they had their like RPG corner where games like this were featured.
Yeah.
And this was where people would go who really wanted to get that RPG experience. You didn't have that on the Genesis so much. You didn't really have that many RPGs. The TurboGrafx had it, but it was more on the PC Engine than on the TurboGrafx. So really, Super Nintendo was your go-to for RPGs, for role-playing games, especially JRPGs. So with a game like this, I just think that it sold well because of Nintendo's push. I feel like if they didn't put this game out, if they didn't publish it for Quintet.
Yeah.
I think it would have sold pretty much the same as Soul Blazer.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think this is one of the big reasons why the third game in the series, which we'll talk about a little later, did not come out in the US. Little did they know that Final Fantasy III and Chrono Trigger were kind of like the two huge games that really pushed RPGs through right before the big, release of Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation, which really kicked things off.
Right.
So.
And around this time, too, it was like, they were so big in Japan that they were like shutting down schools on Dragon Warrior release days.
Right,
or Dragon Quest
days. Right.
So, I think at this point, the Japanese developers looking at their home country and being like, if we can get this to happen in the US, then we'll be billionaires, trillionaires,
Right.
Just we need to find that one thing. So they just kept throwing crap at the wall just to see what sticks. And so they did a pretty good job with Illusion of Gaia, but I just, like you said, I feel like it was a little bit more to go before there was something that was really going to grab the North American market and the European market. So.
I just think the big thing here is that these Blazer games, the Soul Blazer series, the issue is that you're playing for the most part only as one person throughout the entire experience, and people want to see a large cast of characters in these games. The most famous RPGs that do really well here in the States are games that have like full cast of characters with all different
5 or
personalities.
6 different people.
Yeah, like 6 to 10, like
because you always get one that appeals to somebody.
Yep.
You see every character cosplayed at some point. Everybody's got a different favorite. It's not like everybody gloms onto one character.
Right.
And also Illusion of Gaia, it's like the heroes are very reactive to the world around them. They don't really have personalities of their own.
Right.
And everybody just kind of talks to them. So when you have a large cast of characters like that, it kind of frees up the ability to give these protagonists a lot more personality. And I think that's what they were missing. That's what Square finally said, oh, I got it. We need to make these characters not just blank slates.
Right.
And that's when people started really identifying with them.
Yeah, Square did a great job with that with Final Fantasy III, with Secret of Mana, and especially Chrono Trigger, despite the fact that the main character was mute. He didn't talk at all, but he had a personality despite that. Like, you could still see
plus
the
helper
character react.
All had personalities as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's a big part of why those games were successful and why Quintet games were not so much. So let's move on to our next game. What do you got for us, Todd?
Next game is Robotrek, which is yet another Quintet RPG, released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo. This is research and development.
And it's by Ayako Yoda, and this track is produced by Yuzo Koshiro.
Alright, that was Research and Development from Robotrek. Came out in 1994, composed by Ayako Yoda and produced by Yuzo Koshiro. I think the alternate name for this track should be ActRaiser's Big Day Out.
Yes.
It uses that, as I was talking about that before, it's the same instrument set as the ActRaiser games, or at least the first ActRaiser, but in a very cartoony, circus-like atmosphere. I really like this track a lot. I like the usage of those orchestra hits in the background just to kind of give that little extra oomph to some of those melodies at the end.
What do you think about this one, Todd?
Well, I picked it, so clearly I like it.
Yes.
This track obviously is very whimsical, very light-hearted.
Which is good. We kind of needed that after those last couple really heavy tracks that we listened to.
Right. And it plays during the opening screen, you know, when you first turn the system on and the title screen comes up. And during that, the robots that you'll eventually play in the game are all sort of like going around on the screen, sort of like bumping into each other. It's all very fun. It's just a fun track. I like the way that sounds, the way that it progresses, and it's fun to listen to.
Now, the game is actually designed supposedly to appeal to a much younger audience.
Yes, this would be the Final Fantasy Mystic Quest of Quintet's.
Yeah, it was actually
RPG.
called Slapstick in Japan, if I recall.
Yeah. Yep. It is much simpler in its mechanics and its storyline and its gameplay. Like even just getting from start to finish, there's not too much in terms of difficulty in like boss fights or anything like that.
It's kind of easy going.
It's very easy, meant for a younger audience, meant as an introduction maybe to RPGs. The battle mechanic is almost like a Pokemon kind of a thing where like I'm not a Pokemon fan either. I hate to tell the listening audience that, but you put a real robot out there, if he's not working out or he gets weak, you can swap him out for another one. That kind of thing. The actual character that you're playing doesn't battle. It's just these robots.
Kind of like Dragon Quest monsters.
Slave driver.
Right. That kind of thing.
Slave driver.
Slave driver, yeah.
You are right. It's called slapstick, but the pronunciation is surapustiku.
That makes sense.
Yes. I just like saying surapustiku. So fun.
You have such a good accent.
I love speaking Japanese.
Totally lying. Anyhow, so let's move on to the second track we've got from this game. This one is called Hometown in Autumn, again by Ayako Yoda and produced by Yuzo Koshiro.
That was Hometown in Autumn from the game Robotrek, released in 1994 on the Super Nintendo, made of course by Ayako Yoda and produced by Yuzo Koshiro.
I really feel like that track should be longer. It's got such a nice, warm sounding melody to it.
Fall. I get like a fall day.
Well,
like
it is called Hometown in Autumn.
Yeah.
So there you go.
No, she really nailed that feel.
Yeah.
It's just very whimsical. It's not quite winter feeling, but it has that almost winter vibe.
A little chill.
Yeah, a little bit of a chill in the air, but it's still very whimsical. So I dig it.
I feel like that melody that comes in, it's on the left channel and it's like da 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 da. I feel like that could almost be like a female voice singing some lyrics. I think that would go really well with this track.
A lot of that actually does occur with the way that composers write melodies. Is they traditionally, I noticed that they write a lot of melodies out on like a keyboard, just like a flat up, like straight up piano.
Yeah.
And they'll just write that and maybe like hum along to it, and that'll be like the secondary melody.
Right, and then just transcribe it for the whatever system they're working on.
So I mean, I really feel bad for Quintet because this game company is struggling to put out these titles, and they're trying to appeal to the American audience. But even so, this game really didn't sell very well. Even in Japan, it sold 45,000 copies, and in the US, it sold about 20,000. That's what Quintet reported.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's a genre that's kind of struggling to get its hold.
Right.
And now they're releasing a game that's for kids, or not something that your typical RPG fan was your hardcore RPG fan at this point. And I don't think they even wanted to be seen, buying something with cartoony little robots on the cover. Same with Mystic Quest. It didn't do very well until people actually realized that it was a decent game in and of itself.
Well, the box art really kind of hammers home that it's a dark sci-fi adventure, Because you've got
maybe I'm thinking of the slapstick cover instead. The slapstick cover was a lot more cartoony.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
No, the Robotrek cover, like the font for Robotrek is very, like, dark and almost like Terminator-ish. And then you've got this, like, orb in the sky and, like, the space with these pointy things kind of jagging out.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking at it now. Yeah.
And my favorite...
Looks like a Death Star almost,
right.
kind of, yeah.
And so, like, they're clearly trying to appeal to a more adult audience.
Yeah.
And, you know, this was pre-Pokemon as well.
Yep. So
even a game that kind of was a predecessor in terms of, like, the fighting mechanics to Pokemon in a lot of ways, it's still... It didn't know what it wanted to be in that sense. So the game itself was very cartoony, very, very kiddie-ish, but it was still at heart an RPG that just wasn't appealing to that core audience. So very few people played this game when it came out, but my favorite part is that the box art says, another great RPG from Enix. It's like, hey guys, please, come on, another great one.
So in contrast, the slapstick Japanese art.
So it's very cartoony.
It's bright yellow background.
Right.
Slapstick is in different colors, like with
silly
stencils,
characters, like stencil pencil
huge
art.
cartoony characters.
Right.
So it's exactly the opposite of what they were trying to do for the American market. So I don't know, I guess they got it wrong both times. Maybe if they had reversed it, maybe if they had put a more mature-looking cover for the Super Famicom version and a cartoony cover for the US version, it might have worked out a little bit better. Who knows? But
possibly, I don't know. I don't really know what they were going for.
So Todd,
it's a mess.
Would you say, Todd, that this is a decent game, like a game worth playing?
Yeah, I mean, I played it. It's been a while since I've played it, but I did play it through. It was fun. You know, the music matches up with it well. It's fun and it's whimsical and it's all of that. Serious RPG players may want to look elsewhere. It is not a Final Fantasy VI or anything like that.
But for somebody just looking for a fun story without a challenge,
just looking to relax, not too much challenge.
Kind of like maybe a little bit Earthboundy.
Yeah.
Earthbound's not exactly easy.
No, I mean in terms of like that kiddie vibe, because you're playing as kids.
Yeah.
It's more like a lighthearted, fun vibe to it in a lot of ways.
Right.
See,
there's a little bit of like a crafting mechanic in there. Yeah. You develop different robots in different ways.
I'll argue with that on Earthbound. Earthbound is not a fun, friendly kids game. It gets really dark, really dark.
I guess I mean in terms of the fact that you're playing as kids, walking around, doing stuff as children, that kind of appeals to a more, like a younger audience.
I guess a good similarity for Earthbound at this point would be like Stranger Things. It stars kids, but it's not for kids, if you get my drift.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I know you haven't played it and you have no interest in it, but I just don't think that's a good parallel that you're making there.
No,
that's the reason why.
That's why we're all here to talk about games
to
that
disagree with each other.
No, to talk about games that I have no clue about because I've never played this one personally. So,
but yeah, so Robotrek is probably more a game that maybe like a 5th or 6th or 7th grader might get into if they're just getting into RPGs. That kind of a deal.
Right. Like a young adult's book.
Right, well, especially now with what you said about like you sending robots in. So like people who are a fan of Pokemon might enjoy this more.
At least enjoy
Whereas,
the battle mechanic.
When this game came out, Pokemon wasn't too much of a thing yet. I think it was more in Japan and it was just kind of starting to come out in the US. So, maybe that would be a better idea for them.
I would say like if your kid was interested in RPGs and was at the point where they were playing Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, throw this one at them too. I mean, you may not be ready for some of the bigger, more involved RPGs, but something like this might work well for them.
So, a little bit about the composer. This is kind of the weirdest composer research I've ever done because Ayako Yoda only is credited for this game. I haven't found her anywhere else. In my search, I've only been able to find a music student who graduated from Boston University in like the year 2000, which would make her very, very young when this came out, but not impossible. And if you go onto YouTube, you can see a couple of piano recitals that she's done. And it hasn't been any original pieces, so I haven't been able to compare with anything from Robotrek. It's been mostly like Tchaikovsky and stuff like that. But, that almost kind of makes me think that maybe this whole produced by Yuzo Koshiro deal is because she was so young. Maybe he was her mentor. It could be a completely different person for all I know.
Yeah.
But it does kind of fit that they're both musicians, so I can't say that's the same person.
Well, we said the composer of the Wild Arms games was also very young when she started out. And so I think it's kind of a very similar situation. You know, at least in Japan, the market for getting a job is at a much earlier age. And these people, you know, mostly get a job with a specific company, stay with that company for a very, very long time.
Right. So if it is the same person, she is still living in the U.S. in Massachusetts. So it's really interesting. But that's all I got on her, unfortunately. Not many other credits to her name.
Word.
So let's move on to our next one. We just talked about this a little bit briefly, so here's some music from it. This is Krista, otherwise known as Hometown, from the RPG Terranigma, which came out in 1995 on the Super Famicom. It's composed by Miyoko Takeoka and Masanori Hikichi.
Welcome back. That was Terranigma, the 1995 release, Super Nintendo, or really the Super Famicom, which we'll get into in just a second. The track was called Krista Hometown, and it's by Miyoko Takaoka and Masanori Hikichi.
This is such a beautiful track.
Oh, yeah.
It really reminds me of the love theme from Mother 3. The melody is very, very similar. The feel is very, very similar. This one's even warmer sounding, though.
The feels.
Is that why I picked this one, Todd?
You picked it?
I said, is that why you picked this one, Todd?
I thought you said.
I thought he said I picked it.
He said
yeah.
I picked it.
Yeah. Is that why I picked this,
Is that why I
Todd?
picked this song?
I'm so confused.
I'm Todd.
I mean, I probably would have picked this one had I had the chance to, but
No, you think
I'm
you're
glad
Todd.
you did.
You think you're Todd.
I want to be Todd.
You just want to be Todd.
I want to be like Todd.
Yes, and I agree with you that the song is really beautiful. I love the statement and response at the beginning where one instrument states something in one ear and then it responds in the other.
The panning is great.
Absolutely.
And I don't know what you would actually call it, but that sort of like dropping a ball in a bucket sound.
Yes, yeah.
A ploop.
A ploop.
A ploop.
A series of
floof.
ploops.
A floof.
A floofy ploop.
Floofy poof.
They're just really sort of
Kind of like the sound that an analog stick makes when it never...
Oh, boo.
apparently that's canon for the show now.
Yeah. Should have never told that damn story. So, this game is to Europe what Chrono Trigger is to us. The reason I say that is because this is basically Europe's Chrono Trigger. This game came out in Japan and Europe. It was published by Nintendo in Europe, and we never got this game here in the States.
And now it is the darling of Super Nintendo collectors everywhere.
Yes. Well, in the sense that if you wanted to play it, you would just get a repro of
That's
it.
what I did.
Yeah, that's what most people nowadays do. But I remember, like, probably in the early 2000s hearing about this game and being like, oh, it sounds really cool. Like, I would have totally played this because it came out in 95, which is the same year that Chrono Trigger came out. So it was like, man, I don't know, it's just a good year for RPGs. But that's what, anytime I spoke with, because I used to write for a website called retrocollect.com, and they were all like, it's mostly a European PAL style like website, primarily with people in Europe. And anytime I brought up Chrono Trigger in an article, or anytime I brought up anything to do with Chrono Trigger, you know, people would kind of jump up and be like, oh yeah, well, we got Terranigma. So there, take that.
Right on.
So,
Good for you.
yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool that, you know, even back then, Europe and PAL regions were starting to get more exclusive titles that we never got. And, you know, it kind of makes this game kind of still a hidden gem in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But tell me about this one. What's it play like?
It is kind of a mix between Illusion of Gaia and Soul Blazer.
Okay.
It has the mechanic or the live action battle mechanic where you're just sort of walking through the environment.
Like top down action RPG?
Top down, right.
Okay, like Zelda.
You come up to, like Zelda.
And the other Soul Blazer games,
and
yeah.
It has a similar battle mechanic to Illusion of Gaia, where you sort of walk around the environment and you walk up to monsters and strike them. But it also has the mechanic that Soul Blazer had, the Soul Blazer mechanic where you restore towns by defeating monsters, and it's not quite as. It's not a progression like it is in Soul Blazer. It's when you defeat an area, like the boss of an area, this town is now restored, or whatever it is, and then you can go back and talk to all the people in it. And,
cool.
It's really a great game. I'm actually playing it right now. I'm maybe 10 or 15 hours in. I don't know how far through the game I am, but it's really good.
That's cool. Yeah, this is one of the few that I really want to check out, and I'm really hoping that I'll fall in love with this one, and then I'll go back and magically fall in love with the Soul Blazer and Illusion of Gaia. But I have a feeling that this one will grab me a little bit more.
Yeah, this was a 32 meg game too, so it's got
big.
a lot of information on it.
Yeah.
And the overworld map uses like this Mode 7 kind of scrolling technique, so it's actually a really beautiful game. It's just a shame that it never came out over here, and I think that memory probably is a good reason why it didn't, because those carts were much more expensive to make, and if they felt that the US market wasn't gonna sell enough of these games, then don't spend the money on making these giant 32 meg cartridges.
It's a shame.
Yeah.
So I think one of the main reasons why that happened is because the North American branch of Enix had already closed its US doors. So the localization was done, and the English scripts were just used instead for the European and the Australian markets.
Right.
And so we never got it. It was actually translated by Colin Palmer, Dan Osen, and Hiro Nakamura, who were pretty famous for doing tons of other English translations for Japanese games.
Okay.
So I really ultimately just think that this game probably would never have come to the States just because of the fact that, Enix published this game in Japan, Nintendo published it in the US. If Nintendo wanted the game to come out in North America, if they felt that the audience was there for it, they would have done it. And
especially if the translation was already done. Sounds like it was ready to go.
Very similar to Xenoblade Chronicles, the first one.
Yeah. Everything
was done for the PAL region, pretty much. All they literally had to do was just code it and fix it so that it was a US-based game. If the backing was there and there was absolutely no mention of Enix.
Right, well, I was talking more specifically as Nintendo as a publisher was canning these games.
Right.
Because, so if they were the ones that were making the decision, if they're going to cancel Star Fox 2, they're going to cancel Terranigma,
I think because Star Fox 2 showcased the 3D capabilities of the Super Nintendo, and they really wanted to, regarding 3D, they really wanted to push away from those 3D aspects of the Super NES. That's why games like Donkey Kong Country were still coming out, because they were technically not 3D.
Yeah.
They were 2.5D or whatever you want to call them, 2D with 3D rendered sprites basically, which were still popular. Even the Genesis was trying to mock it with games like Vector Man. So
yeah,
I don't know. I get what you're saying.
Right. It's all conjecture. There's no real,
There's no real proof, of course.
It could be literally a combination of everything that we just talked about. Nintendo just looked at all of these factors and we're like,
they rolled the dice.
We're not going to do it. There's just too many things against it.
You know what happened? Somebody accidentally sat on a Super NES controller and they were like, no, we cannot let These people do this to themselves. We need to make the analog sticks bigger.
Oh god, that vibration pack.
Rumble pack.
Rumble pack.
It must exist. Luckily, I didn't have a rumble pack in the cartridge, and the system wasn't on.
Thank goodness.
Is that lucky?
All right, let's derail this conversation where it's going and talk a little bit about the composers. So first up is Miyoko Takaoka. And most of her compositions were credited as Miyoko Kobayashi. I'm not sure which one is her married name and which one isn't, but you can find her under both. Mm-hmm. She's got a huge body of works to her name, including the Langrisser series starting in 1993 and Hresvelger in the year 2000.
Gesundheit.
I know, it's crazy. Since 2003, she's been working almost exclusively on the Atelier series. She's worked on Atelier Judy, Atelier Iris, Atelier Iris 3, Atelier Lys, and many, many others.
So many games in that franchise.
Yeah, she's also doing remixes and arrangements on CDs that are coming out currently for past games as well. What about Masanori Hikichi?
Masanori Hikichi was originally an employee of Cube, but joined Quintet from 1995 to 98, and then afterwards left for Shade, the company Shade, with Miyoko Takaoka, to work on the Grand Stream Saga, which we'll talk about in a little bit. He is still with Shade to this very day. He started composing music for his high school band, and he attended music school. And after he got out of high school, he continued his musical aspirations. His compositions include games like Galaxy Force 2 on the Mega Drive in 1991, Human Sports Festival in 92, Gley Lancer in 92.
Such a good soundtrack.
Yeah. Ys 4, Mask of the Sun in 93, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, and after Terranigma and Grand Stream Saga, also wrote the music for Solo Crisis and Code R, which we will get to eventually. His most recent series is Bullet Girls on the Vita, and composing for both of those games in 2014 and 2016, and that was also again developed by Shade.
So yeah, still in the business to this day. So both of these composers are still composing music after all these years.
Very cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's move on to our next game. What do you got for us, Todd?
This is the Grand Stream Saga, released in 1998 on the PS1. This is the last boss battle.
And it's by Masanori Hikichi, Miyoko Takaoka, and Takako Ochiai.
And we're back. That was Last Boss Battle from the Grand Stream Saga, which hit the PS1 in 1998. That was composed by the two composers we just spoke about, Masanori Hikichi and Miyoko Takaoka, but a newcomer this time around is Takako Ochiai.
that twarmpy synth.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like the arrangement for this track is just not great. I feel like
I like the bass.
The bass is okay.
It's got that. You know what this whole track
I feel
feels
like it needs like the ActRaiser 2 instrument set, but instead they're using like Devo keyboard.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
You know what it is? There's no sustain on the notes that are being held, so everything just feels like very like dun dun dun.
Yeah,
it's very staccato. But the other thing that I think that's really funny about this track, you could throw this in any 80s horror movie and it would totally stick. It would totally fit, just like that bonk, 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 bonk.
Yeah.
Someone's chasing after you, and then you got those like dun dun dun. Dun, dun, dun,
It reminded me of like those scenes with Reptar from Rugrats.
Yes, absolutely. So I have not played this one. I've watched reviews from some of my fellow YouTubers on it, and that's part of the reason why I ended up getting the game, is because I was like, oh, that looks really cool. The weird thing about the characters in this game, aside from the anime cutscenes, is when you're walking around this, it's like top-down, very similar to, all the other Quintet games, or the RPG games at least. When you see other people in the actual in-game world, they don't have faces, which is super creepy.
Yeah, I was going to say I was watching a video of gameplay while we were listening to the track. The graphics look comparable to Final Fantasy VII or Legend of Dragoon, sort of era RPG.
Yeah,
no face,
low detail, very low detail.
Yeah,
super low detail, right? Even for PS1. I'd be interested in giving it a shot, but I've never played it. I know nothing about it.
The anime company who worked on the anime style cutscenes is great. They've done a bunch of other games. They did I believe the Ghost in the Shell anime, the game based on the manga.
Based on the movie, based on the
comic,
based on the serial, based on
based on the Ghost in the Shell serial, which is called Production IG, and so they're responsible for a ton of different anime style cutscenes in games.
They're pretty well known. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the third composer who we haven't heard from yet, Takako Ochiai. Now, he was listed as Quintet staff. So in the credits for Terranigma, they had the composers listed, but then they also had kind of random Quintet staff at the end of the credits, and he was listed along with them. So maybe he was an intern, maybe he was just coming on board during Terranigma, so didn't actually compose any music. But so I'm not sure. But anyways, he's listed as Quintet staff on Terranigma. So we don't know what his function was.
This whole era was weird when it came to credits for Japanese composers, because you would see a bunch of different composers get listed, but in the credits, but then you didn't actually know what specifically they did, which was always difficult.
There were a couple of development companies that were famous for that, Telltale Games. I think they all list just names. They don't tell what specifically anybody worked on. It's very strange. But anyways, so after this game, which is his first credited game, he went back to Quintet to work on Planet Laika, which we're going to feature in a little while. In 2002, he went freelance, and he composed the soundtracks to Blender Brothers, Beyblade V-Force Super Tournament Battle, Inuyasha, The Secret of the Cursed Mask, Senran Kagura Festival Versus in 2016. These were all for different publishers, but Masanori Hikichi and Miyoko Takaoka worked with him in some capacity on most of those other games. So I guess they kind of became friendly with each other and kind of became a composing team as they went on after this game.
So Masanori Hikichi, Miyoko Takaoka, and Takako Ochiai are all labeled as Quintet's sound staff. This is prior to Shade, I guess, being formed.
Okay.
It's worth noting, at least in this game, that the anime cutscenes specifically feature music by Kohei Tanaka. So just as a heads up.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, that music specifically was done by that person.
They must have hired him on. He's a pretty big composer, so that's pretty cool. Right on.
Yeah, so this game is interesting. I mean, the plot is basically about this land called Shilf.
Shelf?
Shilf. Shilf. So a young boy has vanished, and there's these two characters, Eon and Valos, they in the beginning animation, they cut off like a section of this land. And so Valos performs this magic to try to find out where this child is, where the child disappeared to. And they end up finding out that they're in an ancient cemetery. So that's kind of where your journey begins. So it's interesting. I haven't really played through the game. I really want to sit down and play it. Just add it to my list of RPGs that I really need to get through.
Well, if anyone on our Facebook group or Twitter land or in the internet anywhere has more experience with this game than we do, we'd love to hear your impressions of it. So you can go comment on our blog or check us out on our Facebook group or even tweet at us.
Absolutely. So our next game is Solo Crisis.
Yes, now we're getting into these real... So at this point, we get some... Quintet starts freelancing a lot, like we said at the beginning of the show. And they start making a lot of these games that were very unfriendly to English-speaking audiences. So this is where kind of like our ability to even have any gameplay experience with these games kind of goes downhill.
Right. So it'll be dwindling a little bit. But this is a Saturn exclusive. The track is just known as VGM 08. And it's by Naoki Kaneda.
Welcome back. That was BGM 08, very creative title, from the game Solo Crisis, released in 1998 on the Sega Saturn. Music by Naoki Kaneda.
Yes. Very background music-y kind of piece. I wonder if this is like for a menu or just like a cutscene or something like that. I like the melody. It's very catchy. Yeah, very
militant with those drums.
I'm thinking some sort of like a cutscene where like the enemy is gearing up or something like that.
Yeah.
Something to that effect.
Yeah.
I like the way that the stereo separation is with the drums too, because you feel like the drum hit is in your left ear and then the snare decay is like in your right ear, so it feels very spacious. And then I think this is sequenced audio too. It's not like Redbook audio, so it kind of gives it a little bit of like a MIDI style feel to it, but the samples are pretty high quality, so it sounds pretty good.
So this is essentially, supposedly, advertised as ActRaiser Gaiden or ActRaiser 3.
Yeah,
from what I understand.
Which is really interesting. Right? I guess originally they were going to make an action game with city building stuff, just like ActRaiser 1.
Right.
And at some point during development, they were like, nobody likes action platformers anymore. And they just took it all out and decided to go much more detailed on the city building aspect.
Similar, so it's like the reverse of ActRaiser 2.
Yeah, exactly. So you basically, you have to move your force, or the people that you control, over to the portal between two sides of the map. So that you've got your enemy on one side of the map, you on the other side. There's a portal in the middle and you have to get your people to the middle. You have different magical spells that you can use to basically terraform your side of the map. Whatever you do on your side of the map, the opposite happens on the other side of the map. So if you build a hill, you get a valley on the other side. If you put desert on your side, you get water on the other side. So you have to kind of figure out how you're going to help your people get to the middle while at the same time hindering the people on the other side. It's pretty interesting. Unfortunately, you get this really close-up view. It's like a grid of like 8 by 8.
It's like isometric. quick.
Yeah, exactly. But your map is huge, but you can only see like this little tiny portion of your map at once.
Sounds a lot like Populous.
Yes. Very much like Populous in terms of graphics, but like I said, if you really kind of like zoom in on the map and have no ability to zoom out to see like your whole area, that's kind of what I feel like this game is. It might just be the footage that I watched gives me that impression, but it looked really, really hard, and it looked really hard to kind of get your bearings as far as where everything is. I don't know if there's like a pause menu where you can see the whole map or anything like that. Like I said, this is a game where there's no English translation. There's tons and tons of menus. I'd watch somebody just kind of go through the menus, and how they even got to gameplay was beyond me, because there were like 30 options per each page that you went through on these menus. I was like, no thanks, I'm not even going to try this one.
Especially since it's all in Japanese, because this was an import-only game, so it's always difficult to deal with games that have heavy dialogue.
And then you also, as you go through the maps, you collect these ancient tomes with hieroglyphs on them. The hieroglyphs translate into Japanese characters, and then you have to solve a puzzle using the Japanese characters.
Oh boy.
It's literally, there's no way to even if you kind of faked your way through the game, those kanji word puzzles would be impossible for anybody without a very deep understanding of Japanese.
Would you say that you literally can't even?
I can't even odd. I can't even solo this
you
crisis.
Can't even solo this crisis.
I would be having a crisis.
Because you can't solo this.
Yes.
The composer is Naoki Kaneda, and they're actually a previous member to Falcom JDK, also known as just KIM, which is, I guess, their
he was known as Kim.
Yeah. So we talked about him on episode 78 when we played that track Arctic Wind from The Legend of Xanadu on the PC Engine CD.
It was our Winter Special 3 episode, I think.
Yes. So he's worked on a lot of Falcom's really high-profile titles, stuff from the Brandish series, the Xanadu series, Legend of Heroes series, and of course these series. But they didn't work on Faxanadu.
Well, then...
Faxanadu. Faxanadu. Todd.
Listen, these are
I'm on your side.
These are alternate facts.
Anadu.
Anyhow. So he's a very important name on the Falcom series of things. So how he ended up working with Quintet for this particular game, I don't know, but
no clue.
He worked for Falcom before and after this title.
All right, well, let's move on to our next game.
Our next unintelligible game.
Yes, this is another Saturn exclusive that came out in 1998. The track is called BGM 38. I guess we're sticking with that BGM.
I don't know where they play, so I gotta just call them what they are on the disc.
So the game is Code R, and the track is by Masanori Hikichi, Takako Ochiai, Akihiro Juichiya, and Naoki Kaneda. Welcome back. That was Code R for the Saturn. Came out in 1998. The track is BGM 38 and it's by Masanori Hikichi, Takako Ochiai, Akihiro Juichiya and Naoki Kaneda.
A lot of familiar composers there.
Yes.
It's funny because they were on different games we just played, and now they're all kind of together and hanging out on the same game together.
This track is like if you're hanging out, sipping on lemonade outside, and you're trying to mag it with this girl, and so the track comes in. And it's like...
What does lemonade have to do with it?
Girl. And that's
all you can say.
That's it.
She just looks at you funny and walks away.
Well,
and you're still like, girl.
Yeah, you're like, you're a girl. Well, let me think about it. It's 1998. I was a freshman. Yeah, I think a freshman in high school. So yeah, that would have been my response. God. If I was hanging out, listening to... Yeah.
Graduated in 96.
Yeah, just like bobbing my head, wriggling my shoulders. I'm just like,
so you're listening to the track on headphones and you're saying...
Yeah, like I'm sitting next to a really hot high school girl back then, and I'm listening to this track.
Completely oblivious.
Well, no, I'm totally just like...
No, he's oblivious, she's oblivious.
I'm like eye-screwing her,
Okay.
Just like staring at her, eyes bulging, and I'm just like, girl.
I thought maybe you'd just be looking forward to getting back home to your Tifa body pillow.
Oh, yeah. Let me think. 1998? Yeah, Tifa was a pretty big part of my life back then. Yeah.
So,
They didn't have anime body pillows back then, though. That's clearly a millennial
Well, they
thing.
probably did. They just didn't make it over here yet.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, Code R, the R stands for racing. And this is kind of a unique game in that it is a racing / dating / visual novel.
Kind of like Bulk Slash. Like an action dating sim.
Kind of, yeah,
Weird.
but they didn't have that visual novel aspect that this does.
True.
Basically, there's a lot of exposition, a lot of text you have to read through. You prepare for a race, and then you race in... it kind of feels a little bit like Ridge Racer. It's kind of drifty, but looks more like High Velocity on the Saturn, so kind of blocky. The draw distance is like... 20 feet in front of you. It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But depending on how well you do in the race, that depends on how the rest of your story goes. So, you might have a lady friend that comes up to you and she's like, oh, if you win this race, we can go out on a date. Or,
and you're like...
something like that.
Girl.
You're right. And if you lose the race, then you don't
Girl.
end up with her. And maybe another female will come down the lane.
Right.
Literally.
Come down the lane?
The racing lane.
Yeah.
Not that. So yeah, it's cool. It feels like it's a nice branching story interspersed with racing themes, which is kind of almost like an allegory to, or a parallel to ActRaiser. It's got these different types of like city building mixed with action RPG or action game.
Racing and dating sim.
This is racing and dating. Two tastes that taste great together.
What?
I don't know.
You don't date while you race?
You actually date your car.
Yeah. No, it could be like, how in Japan they assign like characterizations, like female characterizations to consoles. So they'll have like a little anime girl type lady be like the Dreamcast console. So it's like that, but with cars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like the Disney movie.
Yeah.
Cars.
Yeah.
Still
except
sounds like
creepy and weirdly sexual.
Still sounds like quite a diversion from what Quintet had done.
Yeah. Well, this was developed by Team 7 and published by Quintet and ESP.
So this was actually one of the first games that they published themselves.
Yes.
Which is weird because they're still known as Quintet. So this 98 must have been the time where they transitioned from being Quintet to being Shade.
Right. Well, they eventually went out of business.
Right.
So, but what they would do is that because Quintet had such a strong roster of composers, they would kind of lend their composers to other development teams and then publish the game. So that's why we see these composers, Masanori Yukichi, Takako Ochiai, these characters keep popping up over and over again, even though the games are developed by Shade or Team 7.
Right.
Because Quintet's name is still there, you'll see these composers on them. So like we said, the only new composer we have here is Akihiro Juichiya, who we've actually featured before in episode 79, which was our Ninja Turtles episode with Matt Ezero. He co-composed the soundtrack to TMNT 3 Radical Rescue on the Game Boy.
Yes, that was my picks, yeah.
Yep, so he started off at Konami in 91, composing for the Game Boy title Ganbare Goemon, Sara Wetara Ibisimaru, and while he was there, he also wrote for Track and Field, Raging Fighter, and Batman the Animated Series, all on the Game Boy.
Oh, that's a good one, too.
Yeah, he had some really good compositions on the Game Boy. Even Raging Fighter was fantastic. He left Konami sometime after 94 and joined joined Team 7's sound team for Code R, and then stayed with Quintet to write music for Planet Laika with Takekawa Ochiai, which we'll be playing next. He and Ochiai then kind of teamed up, and like I said before, a lot of them became like freelancers. So they worked together doing Blender Brothers and Inuyasha, The Secret of the Cursed Mask together, and then worked on Ys 5, Lost Kefin Kingdom of Sand in 2006, and some of the those 3DS MiiForce titles that you could buy for the 3DS menu in 2013. That's the last I found credits for him. So he was still making music up until very recently.
Interesting.
Yeah. So speaking of Planet Laika, let's get into our last track of the day. This is Planet Laika, released on the PS1 in 1999. This is, again, BGM 61 from Akihiro Juichiya and Takekawa Ochiai. Alright, that was BGM 61 from Planet Laika, which came out in Japan on the PS1 in 1999, composed by Akihiro Juichiya and Takekawa Ochiai.
I have one thing to say about this track.
This is like 100% like smoky lounge, leather
it's so
chairs,
cheesy.
guy on piano up on stage,
The guy on piano
and
getting
like,
sick.
and like an old woman in like a red dress holding a scotch and a cigarette. Just
That's
kinda
who's
standing
saying,
there. And every
"Ugh."
once in a while she just goes, "Ugh."
Yeah. That's perfect. You nailed it right there.
That's what that track is.
Pretty much. It feels like
boy.
very Twin Peaks to me.
Yeah.
Kind of like very that cheesy, but kind of eerie, but kind of friendly at the same time.
Goofy, quirkiness.
Yeah.
Wonky.
Yeah. Wonky. That's right. That was a word of last podcast.
Yes.
Yes.
Wonky.
What's the word of this podcast? BGM?
Yeah. Analog. Analog BGM.
Analog is the word of this podcast.
Yes.
So anyways, we already discussed both composers for this particular game. So a little bit about the game itself. The game follows the main character Laika through a mission to Mars, which forces the player to manipulate Laika's multiple personality disorder in order to solve puzzles. All the characters in the game have dog heads, and so Laika was the name of the original dog that the Soviet Union sent into space. So I guess it's kind of a tribute to, I don't know whether the name inspired the dog heads or the dog heads inspired the name, but for some reason that's how it goes. The game was co-developed by Quintet and another development company called Zek. And Zek is best known in Japan for their cult adventure hit Kowloon's Gate, which I've heard of before. I know it's a pretty big title over there. They were responsible for the concept, the design, the scenario, and the graphics of the game. And again, like I mentioned before, Quintet handled the programming and the sound for this particular title. This was one of the last games they ever developed, by the way. Speaking of sound, like this is another one of those games that it's all sequenced audio. There's like 100 different tracks, and it ranges from, I mean, you listened to a little bit of it, Todd. It's like, there's like weird spacey ambient sounds. There's like bizarre, like cartoony horror music. It's really all over the place. But then every once in a while you'll hit upon this kind of almost kind of ironic sounding jazz track with some vocal samples. So I guess, you go to different areas throughout this RPG and then you find, these tracks somehow fit into it. But I too much Japanese for me to really be able to get in there and figure out what plays where.
It's got to be mostly just environmental noise. Obviously this is, a lot of it isn't music. It's just...
Well, there's a lot of ambient stuff.
Just a lot of... Like, we're walking around in the woods, or we're in a spaceship and you can hear the engines, or
It's mostly in space, so it's mostly like technological sounding stuff. Once in a while you get like some nature-oriented ambient stuff too,
right.
But...
So that kind of ends Quintet's run. They were pretty much done at that point, right?
After this, they started kind of hiring themselves out to do uncredited work on a few games here and there. They had a forum on their website that was open for public use, and there was a Game Boy Advance game that was coming out. They were developing the Game Boy Advance game, but it was for an already existing property. So yeah, the game was an action RPG called Magical Hoshin, and it was a counterpart to the GameCube title Battle Hoshin, which was released as Mystic Heroes in North America. It was a Koei Tecmo title, kind of similar to the Dynasty Warriors series.
Okay.
So there was an RPG based on that kind of universe that Quintet was developing, and they went silent on it for a long, long time. And so people on the forum who were, really big fans of the developer were like, where's information on this game? Like, is it coming out? What's going on with it? And then the employees of the company posted on the forum, they were like, we don't have any information on this game. We're shutting this forum down.
Oh.
Like, out of nowhere.
Weird.
And everybody was like,
Whoa.
Okay, that's
All right.
cool. So I guess the forum was closed. You could still see it, but you couldn't post on it. And then eventually, 6 years later, 2008, they finally closed the whole site down for good. I'm not sure if that game ever actually even came out. It doesn't really list it on their works developed page or anything like that. So maybe the game just got canceled and they didn't want to say anything.
Yeah.
There was a tweet from a former employee that said that Quintet went out of business because they went bankrupt.
Oh.
But they kind of kept that secret. So eventually it is kind of faded from everybody's memory. And, a lot of people, like I said, left and went to go to Shade. A lot of those employees are still with Shade, still making games to this day. So it's not like everybody was left
jobless,
destitute, and in cardboard boxes in Tokyo,
becoming ninjas and whatnot.
Right. So, kind of an unceremonious ending for the company. Unfortunately, it is good that a lot of them were able to, still get jobs in the industry and kind of keep working together. So a lot of these games that came out for Shade, you can kind of consider as games that Quintet might have eventually ended up coming out with had they stayed a company.
I really think that if they held on to the ActRaiser rights, or if they continued making ActRaiser games more in line with the first game, I think they would have been a much more successful company.
Yeah, based on the name alone.
Yeah.
As long as they were to, still make quality games out of them. Even the Soul Blazer series, there probably was a little bit more that they could have milked out of that series, I guess. Maybe that sounds like a little too negative, but you know what I mean. If they kept going with that series, maybe in a Final Fantasy kind of aspect where they didn't necessarily all take place in the same universe, but had the same kind of feel or theme to it.
Well, that's the thing. So, Todd, you've played these 3 games. Would you say that they link up for the most part? Like, do they feel like they're part of an actual trilogy?
Not to me. I mean, I know that they are, and I know that they all exist in the same universe, and even knowing that when I play them, they feel like 3 separate games to me. I mean, they're similar in that I know they were all made by Quintet. The gameplay feels similar in some ways. Like the font that they used, the sounds are all very similar. The music doesn't sound similar between them, but like you could tell that a lot of the sounds that the musicians are using are the same across all the games. So like there's definite links there.
Right.
But
sure.
I don't feel that they're part of like one cohesive story.
I mean, I would always link these games more to Enix than Quintet, just because these games were, for the most part, published by Enix.
I think back then, like people didn't really consider.
They didn't know developers.
Exactly. It was Enix is coming out with this game. Oh, right. Enix must have developed another game.
Exactly.
Not considering that Enix is just publishing and Quintet or any other company for that matter could have actually developed it.
So it's always kind of, these games have never really appealed to me in the sense that I wanted to go check them out aside from ActRaiser, just because of the fact that there was no known franchise. And I think that if you were to be a successful company back then, you really needed like a backbone franchise or IP that people could identify with, like, you know, Castlevania, Mega Man, Metroid, Mario, Zelda, etc.
Bases loaded.
Final Fantasy, bases loaded, sure, why the heck not? So,
who knows that Illusion of Gaia is Soul Blazer 2?
Yeah, they didn't market it as
Who
such
knows
either.
that Terra Enigma is Soul Blazer 3? Nobody really knows
well,
that.
even, I would imagine, and I didn't look this up, but I would say that, you know, it could have been Nintendo's idea to change the name to Illusion of Gaia, because maybe they wanted to call it Soul Blazer 2, but Nintendo was like, no, don't do that. I don't know if that's official or not, but it's a possibility that...
You're not building a brand that way.
Soul Blazer
yeah,
2,
well, that's my point, yeah.
blazing again.
Soul Blazer 3, still blazing.
Still blazing. Revenge of the Blaze.
Revenge of the Blaze. Too Blaze, Too Furious. Oh, boy. So that's Quintet. We hope you all enjoyed our little experiment with discussing games that are wonky and weird.
Yeah, well, I had a lot of
never
fun. I mean, yeah, we played a lot of music that I don't think we would have normally played
Yes.
had Todd not been here. So thank you very much for sharing the stuff with us, dude.
Yes.
Sure.
And
Always love having you on the show.
Yeah, maybe
Thanks
we'll
for
have
having
you
me.
on permanently. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, Mike has been talking about getting rid of you. And
Well,
That's true.
I've been talking about.
I want to
getting rid of
replace him
Todd.
with an anime body pillow, and you could just talk behind the body pillow.
would I have to use like an anime voice?
Like a girly voice, yeah. You'd have to constantly compliment me on my good looks and
That's the
vigor.
hardest part.
And vigor.
Vigor.
Yeah, and my vigor.
What's the pay for this job?
Free anime body pillows.
Free lemonade.
Slightly stained.
Three lemonade.
Free
okay.
lemonade.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Free analog stick massages.
Yeah.
Do I at least get my own controller?
Absolutely. Okay. Yes. What color you want?
Not brown.
I got them all. Not brown. All right, so next episode of PixelTunes Radio is going to be awesome.
Yeah,
I'm super
for sure.
excited.
So we kind of discovered an amazing composer. We've played a couple of his tracks on our show before, Retro City Rampage and Venture Kid. His name is Norin Rad, otherwise known as Matt Creamer, and we reached out to him after really digging his music, asked him if he wanted to come on the show and be a guest host with us, and he was ecstatic about it. So he's... picked some tracks that kind of inspire some like classic Nintendo tracks that inspired him to become a composer. We're going to play some tracks from him and kind of get his perspective on some of the stuff that he's written. So we're really excited to have him on next episode. So
Definitely.
that should be a great one.
Don't miss this one.
Not at all. If you guys have PixelChat questions for him, please write in pixeltunesradio@gmail.com, and we will have him answer those questions on the show in 2 weeks.
We really want to know what you guys think about this episode and any others, so check us out on www.facebook.com/groups/PixelTunes Radio. That is our official group where you can go and chat and post topics and discuss anything and everything gaming related.
Except Mega Man and Castlevania.
Except Mega Man and Castlevania and Sonic.
And Sonic.
Clearly. Because Ed is done. He's tapped out. He's tired. Now, if you want to talk anime body pillows,
Yes.
we're good.
I mean, you have no idea how many Daytona USA posts I had to slog through after our Sega Saturn episode.
Very true.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Weigh in on the pronunciation of Faxanadu.
Yes. Yes. Tell us your thoughts on Faxanadu. So you can also check us out on iTunes. Give us a review. Give us a little feedback. Let us know what you thought of this episode, or really just the podcast in general, what you like, what you didn't like, and give us a rating, because that is very much appreciated. We also wanted to mention Ed's side podcast, which is Impulse Project.
Yeah, check us out at impulseproject.info, where we talk about and play music from the demo scene and the tracking community.
That's right. You can also check out my YouTube channel, which you're possibly watching this on, youtube.com/dongled, and it is where you can watch the Dude You Haven't Played This Game video game review series. We're going to be tackling a bunch of really interesting games coming out in the near future. One which I unfortunately have to review because I lost a bet for the Super Ghouls and Ghosts Challenge.
Last time you did that, you dressed up as a girl, right?
That is true. Yes. And we almost recorded an episode of PixelTunes Radio while I was
That's true.
dressed like a girl. Oh boy. What else? At PixelTunes Radio for our Twitter handle, and same thing for Instagram, which we don't really post on that much.
And buy your tickets for Retro World Expo. It's only 3 months away. It's up in Hartford, Connecticut.
Yes.
We will be there. Emily from VGM Jukebox will be there.
Yep.
Robin Purnell from Rhythm and Pixels will be there. It's looking like it's going to be a very fun time, especially for VGM lovers.
Yes, and we don't have a 100% guarantee yet, but we have a really strong feeling that we may actually have a panel, in which case it's going to be around October, around that time. It's like mid-October.
October 15th and 16th,
yeah,
I think.
It's going to be a lot of fun, and anyone who is a fan of the podcast is going to absolutely go crazy for that, because it's going to be a really fun, awesome time. I'm not going to spoil it, but you will definitely get your money's worth if you go to this panel alone, if you are a PixelTunes fan.
I'm confident that you will too.
Yes. I'm going to get naked. Anime body pillow.
I'm paying double. Mike's going to show off his analog technique.
I'm going to pay triple.
All right, so that does it for us. We will see you in 2 weeks with special guest Norin Rad.
Later.
Peace.
Bye.